Is the new finance bill or the proposed finance bill meant to overburden Kenyans or save them from the economic vagaries? That's a big question tonight. President William Ruto has defended the proposed finance bill and the contents therein. And who better to speak to than two members of parliament drawn from Kenya Kwanza, the people you would say they are trusted with this bill by President William Ruto. What lies in wait? That is a big question tonight. We speak to the Member of Parliament for Kangema, Peter Kihungi, as well as Geoffrey Ruku, the Member of Parliament for Mbeere North. Karibuni sana. Both of you are welcome.
Thank you so much.
Asanteni sana. The 20th, Mheshimiwa Geoffrey, is when public participation comes to an end on the proposed finance bill. We have had the leader, actually the majority whip in the National Assembly say, hakuna bili ya serikali inaanguka. My question is there a need then for public participation if this bill is going to be enacted as is?
Yes, public participation is a very key component in our constitution. That every bill or every law registered by the parliament must go through the public participation. The views of the public are extremely paramount as far as the law-making process or registration process is concerned. So the views of Kenyans are important so that the parliament can be able to enrich the content of finance bill, but at the same time it gives a platform to educate Kenyans on what the bill is exactly, what it means. Because one of the responsibilities of the opposition is to rapish, is to say all what comes from government is extremely bad. And because Kenyans are facing challenges, and one of the aims of this finance bill is to uplift, is to be able to solve the challenges which Kenyans are facing in the long term. It may not be in the short term, but in the long term. Because we cannot be speaking of the same problems year in, year out. We must find a way, and any responsible government must be in a position to find a solution for long term on the challenges which the citizens are facing. And through this finance bill, the government is trying to address some of these challenges in long term.
We'll talk about the challenges and in long term. But Mheshimiwa Kihungi, when your leader in the National Assembly says hakuna bili ya serikali inaanguka, question is, this public participation, is it an exercise in futility, so much so that, okay, letani maoni, but that's just the end of it?
Now, mine is just to say that I don't know what he meant when he said that there is no bill in government that cannot go through. But on reality, one of the things that has happened in this country that has never happened is when the sitting president come to explain finance bill. That shows that he won't work with the people with the bill. And he took time. I watched the whole thing, it took more than 3 hours. He wanted to make Kenyans understand the bill before even it goes to them, so that they can be able to make their input. Therefore, whatever the whip said, we should not take it seriously. But the most critical part is how a sitting president took time to explain a finance bill, which has never happened. And therefore, it shows that the president wants, before it passes, Kenyans must be convinced. What we must understand is that the finance bill might be somehow unpopular because we are in an economic crisis worldwide. Everywhere, even when you get to America, you find the sitting president is on a crisis on inflation. That's why he is having a problem with going for the second term. But this is the first budget for President William Ruto. Now he comes out with the reality in the country. We must agree that we took a government when the economy was critically in crisis. Therefore, we must think on how we are coming out of it. Now, the previous government, what they did, they had a borrowing opportunity, whereby they moved from 4 trillion to 9 trillion, around 9.8 trillion. Now, whenever there was a crisis, they moved to borrowing. Now, the current president says we have only an option of borrowing 200 billion. We can also exploit that. We must see how we can make an internal budget that has, we control the deficit. But as we control the deficit, we see how we can be able to build our economy. Therefore, what I'm saying is that the issues that have been raised on housing, the issue of raised on the taxes, we must agree. Like Singapore, when it came to when it moved from third world now to first world, the first step they did was to work on the issue of unemployment. Therefore, the concept of housing is one of the best concepts the president has. But how do we implement it without now involving the issue of borrowing?
Let me cut you short, because we'll talk a bit about the 3% levy on housing. But Mheshimiwa, the pre-election pledges of President William Ruto, that we shall ease the cost of living, faulting even the previous government on the commodity prices, the fuel prices. Question is it a departure? This proposals in the finance bill, is it a departure from the promises of a president, or is it getting to a situation where you're now confronted with the reality vis-a-vis when he was out there campaigning? Mheshimiwa.
There are about more than 15 areas where there is tax exemption proposed by the finance bill. And this is, you know, the myth that the media is not telling Kenyans. There are quite a number of areas where the taxes have been exempted, completely zero-rated, and we used to have those taxes. And I can give you an example. For instance, import declaration fees on gas is completely removed, so that we can be able to lower the cost of consumption of gas. And you know, Kenyans use gas, you know, in a very ranch scale manner. There is a complete removal, exemption of VAT as far as manufacturing of fertilizers, materials, bringing materials which manufacture fertilizers in Kenya is completely zero-rated. That means anybody who wants to manufacture fertilizer in Kenya will be able to do it in a cheaper manner. There is also a complete exception of VAT on pharmaceutical product. If you want to manufacture, we bought serious amount of pharmaceutical product from India. India manufactures a pharmaceutical product. How come that we, as a nation, as an economy, we cannot be able to manufacture some of these drugs? Drugs which cost 5 bob, Kenyan shilling, in a number of supermarkets, in a number of chemists in our town. We should be able to build capacity for the Kenyan companies which are able to manufacture pharmaceuticals product. That's why Kenya Kwanza government, through the president, has completely zero-rated the importation of product which are used to manufacture pharmaceutical products. VAT on export of tea is completely zero-rated. We need to improve, you know, the amount of tea to increase the tonnage. We export tea to other parts of the world. Tea is one of the very critical or important foreign exchange earner for our nation. But we have always been adding VAT to the exporting processes of our tea. So this government has zero-rated or has removed the VAT on exportation of tea, so that we can be able to earn more as a nation, okay, when we are importing tea. So
those William are the 15.
Yeah, there are many. So William Ruto is not rallying Kenyans. It's only that the opposition and the people who are against the government, against the president, are out there saying how this finance bill is burdening the Kenyans, which is not true. Yes.
The people claiming, you know, that Kenyans are being overburdened, it's outrightly out there. Even the president, in his own admission, he admits that Kenyans are really pressed by the cost of living. The weight is on their shoulders. How do you respond to those who say, Mheshimiwa, that you cannot get out of debt by overtaxing a people who are already feeling the weight of the cost of living?
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's the truth. You can't get out of the debt by overtaxing by people who are worried by the debts. But we must face the reality, because when the president came, he came to a government which had have taken loans by excess. Now, the other challenge was the government had overcommitted. That's where the fiscal discipline was nowhere, whereby a government can contract projects worth over $1 billion. Roads only, it was 900 billion, over and above the budget. You see, those are some of the realities that's down on you when you get to government and you find people who had no fiscal discipline. But now you have to have it. What I want to say is that the issue of taxing mostly is seen as if it's going to those who are in employment. But we have to say, we have to work together to build this country. Therefore, the issue of increase of taxing mostly on fuel, the president did put it very clearly. This issue has also been misused in the government earning, because there are people who are paying 8%, there are people who are paying 16%. It has been misused to make the government lose a lot of money in its revenue. Therefore, the concept that has been taken by the opposition is mostly the aspect of taxing on the fuel. But the president did put it clear, whoever listened to him. He said, this thing has been misused, because somebody can claim that he is supposed to get to be taxed at 8%, but not at 16%, because there were two taxes at the same commodity. Therefore, he wanted to be sure the issue of revenue collection is to the maximum, because you can also maybe not tax people, but make the efficiency and maximization of revenue collection that cannot be able to help the government to be able to perform and implement the issue of growth that they are doing, mostly on education, mostly on employment, because also whenever you are taxing and also you are creating employment, you are making people able even to pay. Because also the issue of tax mostly should be not looked on the issue of how much person is giving. It's to also be looked, is the government now assisting our people to make an earning? Whenever the government now gets money, it gives farmers subsidizer. Farmers go to the land, they produce, they earn. They are incapacitated to pay taxes. Whenever the government now starts issues of housing, young people over 300,000 or 100,000 get employment. Those people are empowered to pay taxes. Therefore, the issue of tax, we can never run away from it. But as the president did put it in his interview, the issue of 8% and 16% was misused, and the government was losing a lot of money. And therefore, it was to balance, to maximize the issue of revenue collection.
We'll come back to you on the
I think it's also important. It's also important to put it in perspective. When we say Kenyans are overtaxed, we don't live in isolation. We live in a community of nations, and in a community of nations, we are extremely interdependent. If you look at the tax revenue to GDP of Kenya vis-a-vis other nations in the world, and for instance, the African nations which are at par or almost at par with the Kenyan economy, because the Kenyan economy is one of top 5 economies in Africa. You realize that we are at 14% at the moment as far as tax revenue to GDP. If we compare ourselves with a country like South Africa, Botswana, Morocco, Lesotho, you realize they are way, above us. And what the finance bill is proposing, we only need to move Kenya from 13%. From 14% to 16%, 2% only. So that slowly we can see whether we can be close to other nations which are performing much better economically than ourselves. And remember, you get the product of what you pay for. You get the quality of life on what you spend. We expect to have good roads, good schools, good hospitals, good infrastructure, power in each and every home in our republic. We have to finance that. Either we borrow or we finance it ourselves. So how do we go about it? So somehow we must raise our tax revenue to GDP by a small margin of only 2%. And that 2% will translate to At the moment, the revenue which we correct per year is about 2.2 trillion. 2%, it means we'll be able to correct, as a nation, 2.8 trillion. That means we can be able to finance the higher education costs of all universities we have, of all the TFETs we have, by the 2% margin. So that is huge. So that is something which we need to get as a nation.
Right.
I want also to say that, you know, if you look at the tax revenue to GDP of a country like France, like Germany, they are above 40%. France is at 45%. And we are at 14% at the moment. A country like Turkey is at 22%. We are at 14%.
Mheshimiwa, one will argue that situation is in France or in Turkey. We are confronted with our own local problems here.
And for us to get ourselves out of the problems we are having, we must come up with innovative ways of raising funds to take care of environmental priorities.
All right, Mheshimiwa, I want you to talk about the 3% housing levy. Of course, by the employee, and then the employer contributes another 3%. It is what the opposition has called illegal borrowing. And when the president was speaking Sunday, he said it is not a tax. So if it is not a tax, why not allow the option of opting into the fund other than the mandatory deduction?
Okay, I think that's the government proposal that it has put, and I know it has raised a lot of issues, even from the working community, the people who are employed, and the government is still trying to justify. This is also a form of saving also, because you pay 3% and then the government contributes 3%. Now, whereby we might not also agree with the whip, the convincing proposals that will be raised by our people, because also the concept of housing, the way I want to put it, that's the intentions are very good. The intentions are the ones that open or make a country to be able to grow economically, because a country can never grow when there is the high unemployment on the nature this country is. And now the concept that the president has picked, because the big four had tried to work on manufacturing. It's as if manufacturing didn't work. I think, I don't know why, maybe the previous administration did not be able to implement it. And therefore, with the wisdom, I think the president has zeroed on housing. And therefore, being his one of the areas that he want to turn around the economy by creation of employment. Because now, when you start the issue concept of housing, like Kagema has been considered for housing, they're supposed to do around 300 housing. But the radius there has been advertised. When that program starts, I know how many youth will be employed by that program. The program intention is for affordable housing, but on the other side is on the creation of employment, and also that concept whereby people will be now have areas to practice the issue of housing and working.
So the bigger picture here is employment.
The bigger picture is employment. Therefore, we'll wait for the proposals that the people are putting. We don't want to discourage the common mwananchi between today and Friday. Let them give us a proposal, but they will not kill the idea, because the idea is good. Let them give a clear proposal where we'll be able to move. Because if we kill this proposal, this country will not move. This is our country. We must try to see how we can be able to sacrifice for this country also. We might not think on how the government will do, because the government will go to borrowing. Now, how will we be able to build a country with the economy of borrowing? Therefore, that's why somehow I may not agree with the whip. The ideas that our people are giving, they are very important. And our Kenyans are people who think. They are very innovative. Therefore, I know they will come up with ideas that will be able to make us move with the idea, but also we don't seem as if we are antagonizing our people. But the president's intention is the concept of building the issue of employment and the concept of housing, and also building the practice of saving to our people. Therefore, I want to say that I think that's one of the major issues. We'll wait maybe the budget committee. I am not in the budget committee, but I think that's one of the hot issues that they will get from the proposal from the public. But I beg my people, don't wish it away, because it's a critical infrastructure that has changed some of the countries that we were in level in 1963, like Singapore. Let them improve it and look at on how we can be able to improvise it to be able to make our economy grow.
Mheshimiwa Ruku, think about it this way, and probably that's the argument that has been floated by Kenyans. Well, are you forcing me to invest in a house, and probably I don't even need the house, but you said this money will be refunded after 7 years. With the experience that we have with bodies probably that take our statutory deductions, for example, NHIF, NSSF, and some of the experiences people have had with them, don't you understand why Kenyans probably feel like pulling back because of experiences they've had in the past?
It is important we as Kenyans to realize that the economic performance of every economy is measured using quite a number of parameters. One of the parameters is the saving ratio to GDP of a nation. And we compare the saving ratio to GDP of a nation vis-a-vis other nations in the world. At the moment, the saving ratio of Kenya to GDP is about 13.36%. On average, of all nations in the world, they average at about 23.8%, almost 24%.
So we're 10% behind.
So we are 10% behind. Tanzania, Uganda, and Rwanda, they are ahead of us as far as the saving ratio to GDP is concerned. So what is this as a prudent economic managers we should do? So we should find a way of raising our saving ratio to GDP to be closer to the average of other nations in the world. Why is it important for the nation to have that savings? It is important because you can be able to go back to your savings and borrow from your savings. You can be able to develop other financial derivatives around the savings which you have. The market of financial derivatives in Kenya, it is not yet developed. Any serious economy has financial derivatives. At the moment, I sit in the Committee of Delegated Registration. Is the moment we are looking at financial derivative regulations forwarded to us by the Treasury, the Minister of Treasury, which means we still don't have a developed, well-developed financial market. So housing fund will really help in deepening our financial status of this Kenyan economy, because we can be able to develop a number of instruments around there, which in the long run will help this economy. So we need to explain to Kenyans in a clear terms. Kenyans may not understand what are these financial derivatives or what the instrument which we can develop around there. Kenyans may not understand the saving ratio to GDP, but we have competent economic managers. As managers who are looking at 10 years from now, housing fund is extremely critical. But at the same time, you're talking about 3%, and it is your money. That after 7 years, you can be able to go back and get your money 3 times of what you put in.
Does that include the 3% that my employer can?
Yes. Okay. That's why I'm talking about 3%. Because, I mean, more than 3 times, not 3%, more than 3 times. So that means
government will give me back 6%?
No. 3 times of what you have put in place. Because you put 3% of your whatever, then the employer puts 3%, then there is interest which this money will attract because of the financial instrument which will be developed.
Help me understand. If you're saying then that it is 3 times, you're saying simply, since I'm contributing 3% and the employer 3%, times 3, that means then that is 18%.
No. That's not the way I'm saying 3% is what you get deducted.
Yes.
Your employer also get deducted 3%. Yeah. Let's say it's a total of 10,000. That 10,000 after 10 years will be able to get interest, because that money will be reinvested in many other forms, and those other many forms is the ones I've talked about, that there are financial derivatives which can be developed around that pool, okay? And we'll be able to rise from 13.37, our saving ratio to GDP, to a greater. That's even how the Kenyan economy will become more competitive. That's how the Kenyan banks we have will be highly rated. Just today, if you are getting a letter of credit, so that you can be able to import different products from the other economies to this to this economy, you'll be required that letter of credit to be confirmed by another bank outside there. Why? Because our banks are not properly entrenched. They are not trusted. Why are they trusted? Because our saving ratio to GDP is at 13.3. So we need to raise it so that we may not be incurring more cost for confirmation of letters of credit when we are doing our trade. So it's extremely critical for us to take that direction. The President of the Republic of Kenya, William Ruto, is thinking and acting in the most appropriate and prudent manner to ensure this economy will not be the way it is in another 10 years.
Mheshimiwa Ruku talks about, the problems we have in terms of tax collection and the deficits we have, and obviously saying the only solution we have is to improve from 14% to 16% in terms of tax. Question is, there are those who feel that there's too much wastage in government, that if these loopholes are sealed, corruption and wastage, it would actually bridge this gap, Mheshimiwa.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. That's true, and I think I want to thank His Excellency the President because of the action he has taken on KEMSA. Because that's the most intense. Kenyans are watching. Kenya just want to believe that this government will not tolerate corruption. And I think the action they took on the issue to do with KEMSA, whereby they paid around 3.7 billion. Furthermore, I think it was not yet paid. It was in the process, but the PS was sacked. I think one of the most important things that the government should do, and I think should continually work on, is the issue of corruption. Because no economy can grow when corruption thrives. And therefore, one thing I think to assure Kenyans, the intention the President has shown from the onset is that he wants to create an economy for this country. He wants to prove himself. And chances are those who are in government will have it a very rough time whenever they think he can tolerate corruption. Therefore, the action he has taken on the KEMSA, I'm praying that that should be a warning shot for everybody, that this government will not tolerate corruption. The issue of spending, even as members of parliament, we are going through also cuts in this finance bill. Therefore, it's going across the country. It's going across everybody. The president, when he came to power, he paralyzed all international travels, mostly in government. Therefore, I think austerity measures will be implemented at our budget. Because the previous budget, we cannot be able to improve to work on the austerity measures of savings on government spending. But I think the intention the president has is to make sure that there is zero tolerance of corruption, and also the issue of government spending to be curtailed so that we can make good savings, mostly on issues to do with government savings. And also that's why we are looking at, and I think that was a proposal from the budget committee, and I don't know whether it will work. There are some parastatals that we need to do away with, mostly these regional bodies. You find these regional bodies are doing the work the county governments are doing. They were there just to, before the counties came. Therefore, we must work on it also. Also, one of the areas I think the government should work on, the government is suffering whenever it's working on revenue collection in the national level. The counties, nobody is asking, where did the money go? Because local authority used to pay their workers, used to do projects without even government funding. Now the government is doing 380 billion to the counties, and the counties cannot pay their staff. Those staff were used to be paid by local authorities who never received anything from the national government.
But then healthcare was not devolved then?
The healthcare now was devolved the resources. The healthcare was devolved the resources. Those are the resources that are getting there, because the devolution on healthcare went with the resources. Now the issue first, mostly we can even move away from development. Just paying workers. Nobody was devolved from the national government. They were given, they work with the staff that were in local authorities, and those who were absorbed by the from the national government, they were devolved with their resources. But now you can find that the county government cannot be able to pay. We must be very strict also on where is the revenue going. Because also, the county government also should not be burdened to the national government, because we might be also looking at the government that Kibaki ran, where there were no county governments. But we must understand this government has an extra role to run county government. The county government which had the responsibility to collect revenue, but the revenue on county government is a question. If they can't pay salaries, because we thought that the county government will devolve development, but not personnel. But now we are all the governors are up in arms. We can't pay. We are not supposed to develop. They were not employment bureau, because that's what they have become. Every governor is coming with staff, and therefore they have become a burden to the national government. Because if we want to build this economy, we must build it as a whole. The county government must play their bigger role, because they must also improve on agriculture. Because the government should not do on agriculture wholesomely. The resources the government is devolving, the county government should be seen working on agriculture wherever now the national government supports. Therefore, I think also as we do it on that, we must look also on the issues of revenue collection, mostly in the county governments.
You're talking about own source revenue. Mheshimiwa Ruku, as you talk about issues like corruption, and President William Ruto has demonstrated probably a knack to deal with corruption. Today, the suspension of Bernard Njiraine from KEBS and a few officials, including from the DCI and the National Police. But question is, when it comes to wastage, is the Kenya Kwanza administration walking the talk when it comes to dealing with wastage?
Before I come to that, there's something else I want to put in also in perspective, that the 35% of pay as you earn, which Kenyans are talking about, is for those who are earning a gross of more than 500,000.
Like you.
Like ourselves. So any member of parliament who is against this is not against because he really talking about Kenyans, because there's no Kenyans who is earning less than 500,000 will be subjected to that 5%. Majority of those who are earning over 500,000 are the members of parliament, and I know quite a number of them in the other side. They may not want to be subjected to 5%, an extra 5%. So let Kenyans know when. It is high time now for those who are earning more than 500,000
to show that they wait for the rest.
Yes.
Okay.
And there are very few. There are very few Kenyans earning more than 500,000.
Right. The question on wastage very quickly before we wind up.
It is true that the president has come out and the government has come out firmly to dealing with any wastage. We saw what happened yesterday as far as KEMSA is concerned, and we have seen what has happened today as far as the issues of sugar is concerned, and this is direction. President is firm. He's not talking about fighting corruption. He's not talking about the issues of wastage. He is dealing with it firmly. He is addressing. The other regime was busy talking about corruption, was busy talking about wastage. You don't talk, you act firmly, and we have seen what the president has done, and we support him in that direction. That is the way to go.
As I welcome Regina, a very quick one, probably 30 seconds, because this is your commitment to Kenyans.
Okay.
When this bill comes to the floor of the House, Peter Kihungi, the MP for Kangema, what will you do?
Mine, first of all, is that most of the pending bills that the previous government committed are in my constituency. And I am pushing the president to act on them. And therefore, whenever we come to issue of levying revenue to be able to act on development, I will support it. Okay. And I'm there to support the president. This is our government. We cannot run away from the president. The intentions are good. And whenever the president will go out of the way, we will tell him.
Okay.
But we have seen him coming out as the president and giving us the concept and what he thinks about the country. It gives us confidence to support him.
Okay.
But when he rules it the way, we just tell him. But on this, we are working with the president, and I am one of the major beneficiaries of the pending projects that we need to be revived.
All right.
Yeah.
Geoffrey Ruku, the Member of Parliament from Mbeere North, when this bill comes before the floor of the House, what will you do?
My constituency needs urgently tarmac roads. We need tarmac road. We need dams in my constituency to improve the water and irrigation issues which are facing my people for many years. This bill will give us resources that government can be able to use so that my people can get roads, so that my people can be able to get dam. We'll fight for it so that we can get that.
All right. So we put a cap on Prime Edition tonight. We've been speaking to the Member of Parliament for Mbeere North, Geoffrey Ruku, and Peter Kihungi, Member of Parliament for Kangema. They are members of Parliament from Kenya Kwanza. And I really think we needed to hear particularly their views because Regina is back here. So much of what we've had is from the opposition, and what the opposition has said they stand against this bill. We needed to hear from Kenya Kwanza, and clearly they will pass it.
They will pass it. So I'm just, as Wanjiko at this point, then what was the need then of the public participation?
That was the first question.
Yes.
And I'm sure
Wanjiko will not be taxed at 5%.
Yes.
Wanjiko will not be taxed 3%.
Yeah.
We are only taxing those who are earning huge money. And 3% so that we can be able to help Wanjiko.
All right.
Yes.
And also, their input, we have not dismissed their input. Between today and Friday, their input will be part of the bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Through this,
At least
that's
what we want to
We'll
put
be keeping
clearly,
tabs on that.
what we want to put clearly is what the opposition leader said today,
Yeah.
that we should do away with the finance bill. You can never. This is a statutory document that must be passed. However it is, we must have a finance bill to be able to have money to spend the next financial year.
All right.
Therefore, whenever the opposition's leader says we should not pass the finance bill, that's not practical. It can never happen.
Thank you, both of you, for coming, and thank you very much for your contribution towards the finance bill. And of course, we hope to hold you to account on what happens after you adopt the finance bill, right? For example, Regina.
I know. Actually, the government intends to spend 3.6 trillion shillings in the next financial budget. So government has to weigh in on how to raise the funds, but also Wanjiko is crying. I know you're saying Wanjiko is not someone who earns a lot of money. These are the people who have a lot of loans, taking children to school and such. Well, I'm Regina Manyara. We put a couple on March's Prime Edition.
Thank you very much for watching Prime Edition. My name is Hon.Geoffrey. Have yourself a fantastic week ahead. God bless.